Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Government in Transition, a special program brought to you by the People's Progressive Party Civic. I am Michael Gordon and I'm joined today. I'm honored to have both PPPC national candidates, attorney Priya Manickchand and former Finance Minister Bishop Juan Edghill. Colleagues, I welcome you both to today's program.
Thanks for having us, Michael.
Well, good afternoon, Priya. Good afternoon, Michael. Good afternoon to all your viewers and listeners. So good to be here with you.
I'd like to also welcome both viewers and listeners, and especially those who have been religiously paying attention to this program in the diaspora. I welcome you as well. Need I remind you that this program is also simulcast. It is also broadcast at the same time on Freedom Radio, which is 91.1 FM. So I'd like to welcome the audience on Freedom Radio as well. Straight to the issue at hand, Priya, we're fresh on the heels of the meeting of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States. And it was resounding in my mind, the level of upbraiding the APNU AFC government would have received at that level, notwithstanding the representations of de facto Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Karen Cummings, and de facto Attorney General, Basil Williams. There were representations made also by former Attorney General Anil Nandlal and our Prime Minister-elect, Mark Phillips. But for all intents and purposes, the OAS Permanent Council seems not to have been very receptive of the dictatorial position taken by APNU AFC in these elections. Priya?
You know, it was interesting to watch that meeting yesterday. Oh, by the way, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining us. Whether you're in Guyana or out of Guyana, it's been very trying 4 months for everybody. We're very aware of that. We know people are tired. We know people are fed up of waiting. And indeed, nobody should have to wait like this. Guyana does not deserve this. Guyanese don't deserve this. So we think a long time has been done. My mother used to say long time done, short time left. And I believe that. I think yesterday's meeting was very interesting. Usually at the OAS meetings, and I've gone to a few and I've participated in some, there are always the different positions, it's many countries with all kinds of different interests, and there are almost always people who would be for, people who would be against, people who would abstain on almost any issue, including the Venezuela issue that is not that has electoral nuances to it. Yesterday was very interesting to watch. Yesterday was very interesting to listen. Not a single country came out in support of the APNU AFC coalition, or the APNU as a party, or the AFC as a party. Not a single country came out in support of them. In fact, the OAS may well be putting that down in a list of a small number of issues that they were totally
unified.
Are you hearing me? I'm seeing my internet is unstable.
Yes,
that they were totally unified on. Every single country that spoke was very clear. The recount results have to be used. This needs to come to an end very quickly, and no gangstering is going to be allowed. The other thing that was notable about yesterday's meeting, Michael, is usually diplomats are very diplomatic. They say things and you have to pause a minute and try to figure out what did they really just said there. Yesterday, we didn't have to pause and figure anything out. They said very clearly, in democracies, people who lose elections step aside. They said that the people of Ghana suffer. They said our region cannot tolerate this and allow for dictatorial behavior. The will of the people must take effect. And they said that with clarity. There was very, very little diplomatic language employed yesterday. by any country speaking. It was interesting also to see that the country usually, you didn't see at the OAS meeting Ecuador's government and Ecuador's opposition speak yesterday. You didn't see Chile's opposition and Chile's government speak. You didn't see Canada's opposition and Canada's government speak. You didn't see Venezuela's opposition and Venezuela's government speak. You didn't see that. You saw one, the government of the day representing the entire country in all of the cases. What was notable yesterday is that not only did the government in waiting, not only the de facto government, the government who is presently foisted themselves on us these last 4 months, the AP and UAFC caretaker government ministers speak, but you saw an invitation that was accepted by us, where the opposition also spoke, which I believe is a very clear, very vocal recognition by the Organization of American States, of which we are a part, that we are the government in waiting. This is the government in transition, and that is why they heard from us. And those are very telling things. We can discuss some more later on, but those are very, for me, telling issues that happened yesterday, things that happened yesterday.
Bishop Edghill, Priya in her preamble spoke to the very instructive posture taken unanimously at a permanent council at the Organization of American States, as well as the extremely pellucid statements made. No attempt to go into overdrive in diplomatic jargon. Do you believe this in any way, shape, or form sends a clear message to the APNU FC? And also, I dare add, based on the manner with which the APNU AFC has been hearing clear language and misrepresenting those utterances to mean whatever they think it should mean. I want to hear your views first on the meeting yesterday and the pellucidness with which each and every country in the OAS grouping spoke.
Well, Michael, the first thing that we should take note of, Guyana was not an agenda item yesterday. Guyana was the full agenda. This was not a meeting where Guyana was one of the items to be discussed. The OAS elevated the seriousness with which they are treating this electoral crisis in Guyana by calling a special meeting where Guyana and Guyana only was the agenda. So first of all, I think Granger and his entire bunch of riggers need to take note of that. Here it is, 35 nations are being assembled to discuss your country where you're not behaving yourself in a democratic manner. Secondly, it was clear that everyone who requested the floor, I'm sure ambassadors are briefed by their capitals because that's the way foreign relations operate. Ambassadors don't just go there and follow a line because somebody said something, they said the same thing. The norm in foreign relations is that before you speak representing your state, you are briefed by your capital. So all of those ambassadors, when they spoke, they represented the views that are taken by the governments of those countries which they represented. The third thing that I want to observe, because I looked at the entire hearing from start to finish, every one of those ambassadors are very well briefed, because even in their presentations, some of them very short, some of them occupying the full 10 minutes, they struck at issues that we have been raising here in Guyana time after time. And fourthly, it is clear that the presentation of Dr. Karen Cummins and Basil Williams had no material impact whatsoever on the views of the capitals expressed through the ambassadors who spoke yesterday. It was a shameless attempt at further deceiving the world. I have been saying that the APNU AFC have been insulting the collective intelligence of the people of Guyana. Well, the Attorney General took that one step higher. He went out there yesterday to insult the collective intelligence of the world because the world was looking. He's trying to tell the world that the reason why they can't concede is because GCOM hasn't made a declaration. And the world knows that the reason why GCOM could not or cannot make a declaration is because they are the ones who are interrupting that constitutional agency from carrying out its constitutional function.
Bishop Edghill,
The last thing I want to say on this particular point before we move on is that what I observe is the demeanor and the simplicity with which these presentations were made. The ambassador who spoke on behalf of CARICOM from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I think all Guyanese should look at that again, because she was quite pellucid and quite clear that CARICOM was not interfering. CARICOM was invited to Guyana by the president, and the president went to Ogle strangely to meet and greet all 5 of those heads when they arrived. He wanted a picture opportunity, and now he has his surrogates and his minions trying to create that CARICOM interfered, and then Karen Cummins is trying to say that the CARICOM's report is a fallacy. It is not representative of the truth. It cannot be relied on. It is distasteful. It is despicable and should be repudiated in every way, and with the strongest possible terms. They should receive the strongest rebuke from all the good and peace-loving democratic forces in the CARICOM for going to such a meeting and behaving in such a manner. And I hope when CARICOM meet tomorrow that they deal with this matter condemningly. So thank you, Michael, for allowing me to get that in.
Bishop, you raised a very important issue at the end there, and you spoke specifically to the duplicitousness of President Granger and whatever is left of or the remnant of his administration. But I want to bring you back to a comment you've made about the presentation of Basil Williams. And you're a minister of religion, and you may have would have facilitated in many instances individuals' deliverance. And I'm going to point specifically to the blatant lies told by the Attorney General. Here is someone purporting to be the Attorney General of Guyana who went to the OAS Council. And you spoke about insulting the intelligence of the entire Organization of American States. However, this is not just referencing the reason why GCOM has not made a declaration as yet. The Attorney General, the person purporting to be the Attorney General of Guyana, said to the OAS that the Caribbean Court of Justice, and I'm certain each member of the OAS, and I'm going to ask both you and Priya to pronounce on this, each member of that permanent council would be in possession of the ruling of the Caribbean Court of Justice. But Mr. Williams went to the permanent council and said that the Caribbean Court of Justice, in essence, threw away Order 60. How do you respond to that when such a blatant lie is told on behalf of Guyana at that level? Outside of being embarrassing, it's absolutely wrong.
Well, Michael, the truth about it, nobody could be delivered or free from something that they enjoy. You want to have to change. So even in counseling, or you're trying to help somebody to reform their lives, they have to recognize that they have a problem and they would like to change. But you cannot be delivered from something that you enjoy. And it would appear that the modus operandi of Granger and all of his ministers and all of the mouthpieces who have been speaking on behalf of the APNU AFC since this attempt to rig the 2020 elections have enjoyed misinformation, lies, and untruth. And they don't care if they are fact checked and found to be wrong. They sit there with straight faces and lie. They go to, I don't know how this is allowed in court, but I listened to the arguments that were made before the Chief Justice on the Micheal Jones case. It was the same line they were carrying. The Chief Justice just ruled and told them what she could not have entertained because these matters were dealt with by the CCJ. And one of the things that she said she couldn't entertain was the issue about Order 60, because the CCJ actually upheld Order 60 and referred to it in several ways so as the way to bring conclusion to this matter. And he's going to the OAS where everybody is asking that the results be declared on the basis of the recount. He's actually making the point, no, we can't do that because the highest court, our apex court, has invalidated Order 60, which facilitated the recount. I want to make sure that I keep my words decent, but I don't know where people like Basil Williams belong. They certainly don't belong into a high office. They certainly don't belong in a place of public service and representing the people of Guyana. He should bag his face. And to carry the title senior counsel, I will leave Priya Manickchand, who's also an attorney at law, to say how she feels being an attorney and listening to the head of her bar in the country where she's a practicing lawyer. Because as the attorney general, he's head of the bar. He's the head of the bar. And she's practicing in that same jurisdiction. So I'll pause and rest my case here, Michael, and see to Priya.
Bishop seemed to have preempted me, learned counsel. And my question to you relates to this very issue from the perspective of the actions of the purported Attorney General as an affront to this noble profession.
Well, more than Basil Williams saying that yesterday, I think yesterday afternoon we learned, the country learned, we knew that a letter was actually written by Karen Cummings to the Secretary General, which would have been distributed across the General Council yesterday, where they specifically said that the CCJ had found Order 60 not to be constitutional and had therefore discounted the recount. Now, that's not new. That has been what the PNC, APNU, AFC has been saying on all their talk shows, on all their TV programs, on all their Facebook programs, in the streets, in the bottom houses. They have been saying that this, in fact, their entire argument before Chief Justice in the last Micheal Jones matter was that the Caribbean Court of Justice had nullified Order 60, and that is why they had to go back to Mr. Mingo's and the other 10 declarations. That is actually not true. It has never been true. But just to be clear, let us quote almost exactly what the Chief Justice said. The Chief Justice said the idea, the proposition that Order 60 was thrown out or nullified by the CCJ, she rejects that out of hand, that she finds she does not accept that argument. And in fact, the CCJ endorsed Order 60 as Order 60. Let me just remind our viewers, Order 60 is really that order that allowed them to go back to the recount and gave the instructions and rules that they would follow in the recount. And she said very clearly, I can't look at it, but let me just, because the CCJ has looked at it very clearly, but the CCJ was very clear that in endorsing Order 60 as something that was good and useful, transparent, to recount the ballots where there were problems in the elections. So both Karen Cummings as well as Basil Williams were untruthful yesterday to the OAS. The unfortunate thing with that is in this world, in the 2020 world, Michael, the minute you tell an untruth, it is there recorded forever. But outside of being recorded forever, it can be verified almost within 60 minutes. It's something called fact checking has become a thing. Fact checking. They have entire shows called fact checking. So to fact check what was said to the OAS yesterday was not difficult. And so not only the OAS, but the whole of Ghana now again knows that the AP and UAFC lied not only to them, but to the entire organization of American states. And it's really unfortunate because um, Order 60 came about for the March 2020 elections because we had problems and because Granger said, Granger invited the CARICOM region. And that's why Miss Gilchrist's presentation yesterday was very telling. I mean, she sounds like a soft-spoken lady, the lady who spoke on behalf of CARICOM. But she was very clear. We didn't jump on a plane and go to Guyana because we fast. We went to Guyana upon the by and with the invitation of the president of Guyana, and we engaged in sending representatives there for the recount. As per agreement between the president and the opposition leader, and our representatives there did all that they could do to bring home a report, and they found they were of the unshakable view that the recount was transparent, that the will of the people were reflected in the recount figures, that they had heard the allegations made, and that they did not believe those affected in any way the will of the Guyanese people, which was expressed on March 2nd. Karen Cummings also lied when she told the Permanent Council in her closing remarks that the CARICOM observers did not stay to the end of the recount. I'm not sure how many people heard that, but as soon as she said it, I heard it too. She said they didn't stay to the end of the recount. They don't know. They only have an 18% sample. Now, you could talk about whether you think 18% is enough. You can have that discussion, but to lie outright and say that they did not stay to the end of the recount is absolutely untrue. Those people were there were in Guyana past the recount date. I think they stayed here for 40 days when they submitted their report and then they left. But to tell such a blatant lie when, again, that's so easily verified. There are photographs existing on the internet with the CARICOM team taking photographs with whoever was in the tabulation room on the 35th day when they had actually issued the last certificate, which was the certificate of recount for Region 4. So the lies were very, very verifiable as lies and disappointing, and but telling. Those lies speak. They speak to the fact that if you don't have anything truthful to say, then you will lie, and they continue to do that now. But this afternoon at 3 o'clock, the Court of Appeal is going to meet to have a case management conference where it is going to, because, you know, an appeal has been filed. Justice George, Roxanne George, was very clear about what she had jurisdiction to deal with. She did not have jurisdiction to do it. And she was very clear the recount figures must be used, that Order 60 has been determined already by higher courts than herself, and she's bound by those courts to be valid and to have been useful at that period, in that time, and there's nothing wrong with that Order 60. That decision is being appealed, and this afternoon the Court of Appeal meets to decide to have a case management conference, decide who's going to file what when and when they'll hear the matter and so on. So the APNU is not giving up. I see they just issued a statement while we were on this program. They literally just issued a statement saying that they're willing to talk with other parties for the sake of maintaining peace and order in the country. The time for talking is over. The people of Guyana heard what you had to say prior to March 2nd. A long time prior to March 2nd, they went out, they cast their vote, and those votes must be heard. Those voices must be heard. The votes must be given effect. To come now when you've lost, to say, oh, we're willing to talk about because we want to maintain peace, as though if we don't talk to you, there's not going to be any peace. Well, it's a different day in Guyana. It's a different day in Guyana. And I want them to understand that. That move fire, slow fire is not going to work in this 2020 Guyana, because you saw how strongly people feel about their votes and about their votes being counted, and how spontaneously people expressed themselves on the 6th of March when Mr. Mingo on the 5th, despite objections, went ahead and made announcements that inflated the APNU vote to give them a win. So it's not this thing that you got to talk to us now because we want to maintain peace. We want to stay in office, and we're going to stay in office and talk to you. I don't know who is willing to talk to people. It's like a thief man jumping your house, and while he's running through the door with a TV, and you stopping him, and the neighbors stopping him, and the police outside stopping him, he says, well, hold on, I'm willing to talk about how we can share this TV. TV was never yours. It's not yours. You got to put it down and leave.
And go to jail.
And leave. Get out the place and possibly
beg for amnesty if possible.
Possibly face consequences for jumping into people's house in the first place. That is what we have going on here. So that new statement that they just issued there is very interesting.
Bishop, I see this most recent statement as an or else ultimatum. How do you feel about it?
Well, it is not new to me, because if you've been following Aubrey Norton, who has been a chosen utensil to test out the various narratives and scenarios on the APNU AFC's behalf in the public domain, whenever they're going with a new narrative, you should check it out. Aubrey Norton is that chosen utensil. A few days ago, he was on radio and television in Trinidad, and he started to talk about we are open for dialogue, and it's time for us to start talking because it's only a political solution that we could have. So I think what the PNC is seeking to do is to make the nation so stressed out, so mentally and psychologically fatigued, that the people would want to say to the PPP, oh man, y'all talk and let me done this thing. Y'all talk and let me done this thing. But like Priya says, the people of Guyana are not going to allow that. And more so, yesterday we heard from the international community, the OAS, they didn't say it's time for the parties in Guyana to meet and dialogue to find a political solution. They were very clear. The democratic will of the people must be respected. Granger must step aside and allow the democratically elected government to take office. So the bullies, the thugs, the hooligans, sorry for being so strong with the use of my language, but it's time we call them out. This group, who is so desperate to remain in power, they are prepared to say they won the elections with stealing, using Mingo's figures. Then they said they agreed to the recount after they tried to challenge it in court. Granger agreed to the recount. He put Ulita Moore to stop it in court. They go to a recount. Norton comes on the 10th and followed by others to talk about irregularities and anomalies to discredit the recount. The recount numbers show that the PPPC won the elections. So they've sought now to discredit the entire order so that they could get rid of the numbers and all the rest of it. They have inserted Lowenfield with his fictitious reports. The courts have rejected that. And the final ruling from the CJ, the Chief Justice the other day, says Lowenfield must follow the instructions of the commission. So their backs are against the wall, because it is clear, if Lowenfield don't provide a report based on the recount, the chairman says she's going to ask the deputy. If the deputy don't provide it based on the recount, the chairman will be left to take the action that is appropriate to bring this matter to conclusion. So they know they can't get away from the recount numbers. So they are concerned that it is clear their time is coming to an end. They're a cornered rat. They are now prepared to put up some kind of good face. We are prepared to talk. Talk about what? You have lied. You have cheated. You have attempted to steal an election, and you expect the people of Guyana to sit down and talk with you to say you're going to be a part of determining Guyana's future based upon this current electoral cycle and political arrangement. You must go and reform yourselves, redeem yourselves, go back to the electorate and let them give you a mandate. However, we have always said, and the PPPC have always said, that you can't ignore the fact that the PNC has a constituency in Guyana. So any new PPPC government, an Irfan Ali-led government, based on our manifesto, will be prepared to work with all stakeholders, including the political opposition, which is the PNC. That engagement of how they will be involved will have to come through political dialogue. But the political dialogue must come after the declaration and the swearing in of the new president. And we start to chart a path forward for inclusiveness and to ensure that all are involved in Guyana's future. But not by you trying to steal an election, stay in power, and trying to tell the winners of that election, come and talk with me so I could dole out to you some goodies so that you could feel a part of what is happening. They are rogues and they must be removed from office. And Micheal, I am asking, as a result of yesterday's OAS meeting, I believe it's time for stronger sanctions to come on individuals, because the display of Karen Cummins and Basil Williams were not personal positions taken. They went there as the foreign minister, de facto foreign minister, that had to have David Granger's approval. The text that was read, the speech that was presented had to have the approval of the cabal, and that shows a thinking. We're going to sit there and continue to peddle lies and misinformation, obfuscate issues, seek to create obstacles for the smooth transition of power, to force the people of Guyana to become weary to get into some form of political dialogue or power sharing or some form of agreement. The issue is now, those individuals must face personal sanctions, and it must bite hard. It must bring them to a place where they must give up. They're not listening to the courts. Now, only God knows what they're appealing this afternoon. Everything that the Chief Justice said, she aired. And they're the only ones who believe that she aired. They're using the court. And that was said by the Secretary General of the OAS. It's time they stop using the judiciary to linger and stay in power. And Micheal, while they stay in power, they continue to squander the resources of Guyana. They continue to spend the money, deplete the foreign reserves, get rid of state assets, doling out lands to their friends and their cronies, signing off contracts and deals with their friends so they could get kickbacks. The country is suffering, and all of that is happening in a time where we have the COVID-19 pandemic, where we need a democratically elected government who could engage our development partners to ensure that we get benefits to the people in Guyana so that we could be able to bring some amount of solace, support, and to kickstart this economy to ensure that we don't enter into a recession and ultimately a deep financial crisis. We are in trouble as it is right now. And the longer this situation takes, it's putting us deeper into a hole. So this nonsense of them trying to put out like some olive branch, let us talk, it is nonsense. And I also need to speak to this religious jargon, and sorry that it has to come from me, that Karen Cummins used yesterday afternoon in her closing remarks. Keep Guyana in your prayers, as if prayer is a panacea for wickedness. God does not reward wrongdoings. The whole world is watching you stealing an election, and you're saying, pray for us. Pray for us for what? So that we can get through with the rigging? And this is disgraceful to the great religion of Christianity, of which Karen Cummins professes to be a part of. Nobody needs to pray for you when you're stealing. They need to rebuke you. They need to correct you and help you to reform yourself. And I believe it's time that the religious people of this country, particularly the Christian church, which has given succor to David Granger and this wickedness, it's time they be called out. Because you're going to the international stage now and you're invoking, well, you know, Guyana has calm. They are God-fearing people. We are not in turmoil. We're having peace. So we don't know what you're talking about. Be patient with us. Give us a chance. And it is a Christian church who must take a stand now and say enough is enough. All those church leaders who got national awards, who Granger believed that you were upstanding men, national leaders, it's time for you to show your leadership in Guyana. Are you standing for this rig, or you are standing for justice for the people of Guyana? It's time that they speak and tell Granger, stop being sanctimonious, this holier than thou approach. You are stealing. You are destroying people's future. You are insulting people. You are harming people's economic livelihood. You are harming an entire country. And you're going to tell the world, pray for us while we get through with our wickedness. I'm offended by it. And I'm outraged that such a low level of wickedness would come to the OAS, and you're seeking to hide. Prayer is not a panacea for your wickedness. You must reform yourself, repent, and let justice come forth in Guyana. It's time for that. And I'm waiting on the church leaders, including those who the president himself had confidence in, that he doled out to them national awards. It's time for us to hear from them.
It's instructive that Bishop touched on the tweet, yesterday's tweet by the Secretary General of the OAS. Essentially, there is an argument.
Yesterday, yes.
There is an argument that the APNU FC has been manipulating and overusing the court system, abusing the court system to achieve its objective. One of which is to ask the court to endorse a report by Chief Elections Officer Keith Lowenfield, which essentially adds more than 15,000 votes more than the total number of people who have voted. You're asking the courts to endorse it, to hand the victory to the APNU FC. Where do they go from here in relation to their barefacedness in attempting to manipulate these elections?
So let me just say, everybody has a right to go to court. That right should not be abused, and responsible leaders, particularly political leaders, would very prudently exercise that right. So I have to be very clear that I don't have a problem with people going to court to enforce what they believe are rights. When you change that and you go to court to abuse a system, to use the system, to use this right that was given because it's supposed to be something that's uplifting and helpful, to stay in office for longer, then there must be penalties for that. And you heard Roxanne George, acting Chief Justice, say very clearly, look, prior to today, I didn't, this is when she ruled on Monday. I didn't address the issue of cost. Cost is when um, two attorneys, two sides or three sides or 10 sides, the losing side has to pay the legal costs of the winning side. So she said, I didn't address that because, you know, this has been public interest law and so on that we've been dealing with. But on this occasion, I'm going to give you a chance to address me on costs. And she gave them a timeline. And she was clear because this seemed more like not someone prudently exercising these rights that are conferred on them to utilize the court to enforce rights, but more an effort to use the courts to carry out either a judicial coup, which is to give Granger government an office that the people of Guyana did not give him, or to delay the declaration of the election, which allows him and his cabal to stay in office longer, and the people's will, the expression of the people's will, to be delayed for longer. So I believe it is very clear to us at this stage that that is what is happening, because what you have is the Court of Appeal has already spoken. On Order 60, the Court of Appeal has said that Order 60 is valid. The Court of Appeal said that already. The Court of Appeal can't say something differently now. And so you'll have that bit of a problem. They're now appealing Justice George's decision to go, and she relied on the Court of Appeal and she relied on the CCJ when she made her decision, and they're now appealing that decision to go back to those two courts. They couldn't possibly believe they would win. So this has to now be that they are attempting to waste more time, stay in office for longer, perhaps to make more mischief in other ways. We'll see. The days will unfold. The PNC, this is the PNC all over again. For whatever reason, they're like they're a political party who have zero confidence in their ability to win people over. Their DNA, it's like a child who has a young teenager, young adult who has no confidence in themselves. That is them. They believe that the only way they can get into office is to rig an election. And so all their efforts generally are focused on rigging the election. If the PNC, APNU, AFC had spent quarter of the time that they're spending to stay in office illegally since the no confidence motion, if they had spent quarter of that time and a fraction of that money, because we're paying lawyers like crazy, billions of dollars, if they had spent that time serving the people of Guyana, you wouldn't have to rig an election. They may not have had to rig an election. It would have been, people of Guyana might have wanted to see them serve a second term. They had no intention, clearly from their behavior now in retrospect, they had no intention of winning hearts and winning votes and keeping themselves in office through the will of the people. Their entire effort has been to rig the election. Now, the thing about that is you're talking about a 75-year-old Granger who saw Burnham rig in the 1980s and get away with it. Burnham did not have live TV. You didn't have Facebook. Everybody didn't have a camera, a phone in their hand with a camera on it that could immediately broadcast live to the world. We did not, was very different circumstances with the Cold War and so on. So he is bringing the 1980 playbook into 2020, and he's found that it can't work. So for 4 months, he has been rebuffed at every turn, not only by the People's Progressive Party Civic, which has, and let's acknowledge that, which has led a remarkable fight against the attempt to cause us to become a dictatorship. But it has not been by the PPP alone. All the small and new parties, and for me, it's harder for them because they have much less resources, have stood firmly against any entrenching of dictatorial behavior. Ordinary citizens of this country who would have said, we voted for the APNU AFC. We are not prepared to see them use our vote like this to keep themselves in office. Dominic Gaskin is a local hero for coming out and saying, that this is wrong, that his father-in-law is attempting to stay in office. Although the people of Guyana don't want him in office. So Priya Singh, who has said she's a member of the PNC, who has said she's giving back her medal that Granger gave to her, because this is not the Guyana she knows. Ordinary people who have written letters to the newspapers and on Facebook saying, I voted for you, but you're not going to use my vote like this. It's been a collection of voices, and that's why it's a wall that they're unable to penetrate or climb over. It's a hurdle they have not been able to get by, because people, Black people, Indian people, Christian people, Hindu people, Amerindian people, Muslim people, men, women, young people, overseas people, local people, Guyanese people, non-Guyanese people, all our international partners, friends, and allies, including those we've had quarrels with sometimes, have all stood up and said, no, Granger, no APNU AFC, no PNC. In 2020, you will not steal the will of the people of Guyana. In 2020, the will of the people of Guyana will be given effect to. And that's why I think it is impossible to continue this fight for much longer. I believe this matter is going to go to the Court of Appeal, and I believe it's probably going to try to take it to the CCJ also. But I don't believe we're going to be here much longer. And I believe I've seen a commitment from our international friends and allies that suggest that if extra judicial means are attempted or are employed in order to keep the Granger administration in power, those two will be rebuffed, and those two will be met with equal and stronger responses. I don't want to say force, but responses. I feel that the commitment from the international community has been remarkable, and it has gone on too long for them to just back out now and leave us alone. So Guyana is not going to be abandoned. The people of Guyana will not be abandoned in this struggle for democracy in 2020. I truly hope, Michael, and I hope that this is the last time ever searches for democracy, making sure our vote is respected. I truly hope this is the last time. I don't believe our children and our grandchildren should be going through this fight. Look, there are other people in other countries. I saw a young Guyanese girl, she probably changed her citizenship by now. She used to be the daughter of a well-known pilot, Krishna Sankar, and her name jumped out at me when I saw the program because her name is Krishna Sankar. And she's in Canada, and she's working with a team to do some amazing research for COVID-19. And it was so beautiful to watch, so beautiful to listen. This is a girl, gotta be in her 20s. She's in Canada. She's working on research that will help the world. What are 20-year-olds in Guyana doing? Year-olds in Guyana are first degree employ their skill or their brain or their learning or their thoughts towards something that could help this country or their family or the world. It is to fight a regime from taking democracy away from the whole country. That's what our 20-year-olds are employed in. I truly hope this is the last time. This is the last time this country sees PNC learn will never forget.
I'm having some difficulty.
Bonds and who seem to think that everything here is okay.
I'm having some difficulty with your audio, Priya. I will certainly get back to you, if not on this program, on this subject, or on a subsequent program. Your internet seemed to be having some hiccups. You pointed, however, to a very important issue, and it's the whole notion of representation. What I saw a phenomenon yesterday on social media that I personally think it's unprecedented, and it's an instance where dozens of Guyanese, those who openly have said that I voted for APNU AFC, said to Karen Cummins and Basil Williams, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid you do not represent me at the Organization of American States. And it's something that I notice seems to be catching on as a trend on social media. There are photographs of Basil Williams and Karen Cummins, and there's a caption which says, "You do not represent me." And it's very instructive. It's very interesting. It's very interesting to note. Uh, there is the issue also of, and you also refer to the battery of lawyers that are being hired, the resources, financial resources that are being put into the hiring of these lawyers as we continue to abuse the court system, as APNU FC continues to abuse the court system. At what moment, and our time is practically gone, so I'll ask this question to both of you in your closing remarks. At what point does the gentleman by the name of David Granger step in to say enough is enough, as he, in my own estimation, continues to hide, as he, in my own estimation again, remains the author of this attempt, the author of this attempt to hijack, rig, and hijack government in Guyana in 2020. Priya spoke at length on this issue and why it cannot be successful in 2020 as against in the 1980s. But Bishop, I'm going to bring you in here. At what point does one take to the forefront to say, I have seen enough, enough is enough, I concede, in the interest of my people as a patriot, we cannot continue to suffocate Guyana with our bottomless and our never-ending political shenanigans, which has no positive end for us in sight. Bishop Edghill, your closing remark.
That happens when an individual puts self on the back burner and put others on the front burner. That happens when you start living for the sake of others and not for the sake of yourself. This rig that we are talking about, the main beneficiary of this rig is Granger. He is accepting all of this worship, that he is this infinite character that is good for Guyana and is the only one that could bring deliverance to Guyana. And he basks in that kind of an environment. And he comes out in a sanctimonious way. I have always obeyed the Constitution. GCOM is independent. I will obey the courts. And everything that is happening around him is contrary to what he just said. Granger must recognize he has to come to a place to start living no longer for himself. He's 75 years of age. He has to start living for the sake of people. Or secondly, and I've said it before and I'm saying it again, the remedy to this, out of that 217,000 people who voted for the APNU AFC, there need to be the birthing of a new leadership, a citizens movement from within the belly of the PNC, APNU AFC, that start rejecting this kind of a filth and crassness. And Granger, having seen the writing on the wall, will step out. There must be an implosion. There must be people from within their own ranks. And that is why earlier I call out the Christian church, because the Christian church have given them succor in all of this. The prayer meetings, the midnight prayer watch, I'm sure you've been seeing some of that on Facebook, the daily scriptures, the chantings, the moving with the coffin and the singing of the songs. And no weapon formed against David Granger shall prosper. And who is the devil? We have seen all of that. We need to see some amount of sanity within the ranks of the PNC and a citizens movement start rising up. that he will understand this can't continue to happen. And the next thing that needs to happen is that those lawyers who are giving life to this rigging plot, they must start facing some of those sanctions that we are talking about. Those lawyers who are relentless because they have their own vested interests. They have a lot of things to hide. They are beneficiaries from part of the corruption. They are in the belly of the beast. Sanctions must start meeting them. And I believe when the cabal recognize, one of the things that I think we need to explore, we need to look at ways of cutting off the money from this government. Maybe we should find a mechanism to stop the encashment of government checks for contracts and for the payment of these ministers and the rest of it. Maybe we should explore such a mechanism, because when you start cutting off the money, they will start recognizing, hey, this is drying up. Of course, some of them have so much that they have reaped from corruption, they could last for a while. But we must be able to put the squeeze on them some way, because especially with this kind of reckless behavior. And of course, I believe that the PPPC and all the other contesting parties must remain resolute, should not bend to pressure. We should keep our people informed. We should keep our people highly motivated, and we must not allow this skullduggery to continue. I saw in the news while we were on air that a homemade bomb was thrown at the Surinamese embassy. Now, you know that kind of a maneuver, that kind of a behavior, you want to attack the international community, but you don't go to the strongest target, you go to the softest target. And that's a PNC activity that we have to look at. Ways and means of how they could create confusion, how they could, we had 3 buildings, government buildings that were burned. And then all of a sudden, they didn't get the kind of reaction or the response to move them to their state of emergency that they were talking about, so they had to back off. We have to keep our people informed that we don't have any triggers that could allow them to move to the next stage of their wickedness. And the responsible behavior of our political leaders and our people of this country must be commended. So, Michael, I am of the view that this case going to the Court of Appeal will be another group of people who will be convinced, who supported the AP and UFC, who will be convinced that they are liars, they are riggers, they are fraudulent in their approach, and they want to steal Guyana, and another block of people will depart from them. And sooner or later, they'll recognize the cheese stands alone. So thank you for the opportunity of sharing with you and Priya and the people of Guyana today.
You're mute. You're muted.
I think Michael is mute.
We haven't finished this yet, Bishop. Priya, I'll ask you for some closing comments in this regard, especially from the perspective of the way people have been reacting on social media following the meeting of the OAS yesterday.
Well, people were very clear, and that's, Michael, that's what I'm saying. We're living in a totally different world. Even I am not, I have learned in this period how very important and how very changed our world is. Look, I started government in 2006. In 2006, I'm not sure if there was Facebook, but I certainly wasn't on Facebook. And so information, the communication of information, and the ability of people to understand information in that kind of forum has changed tremendously from even when we started government, and definitely from when Granger learned that he could rig an election way back in the 1980s. Yesterday, people followed the OAS meeting and were blogging it sentence for sentence. Were ordinary people who are don't have international relations credentials. understood what people were saying, counted up which country said what. Before the meeting was finished, was able to list the number of countries who had already spoken against us, not us, but against what was happening. Pointed out that no countries had supported the AP and UAFC. And I know we're not a Twitter country. We haven't really, it doesn't seem as though Twitter has taken to Guyana as yet. But yesterday, across the world, Canada tweeted, the US tweeted, the OAS General Secretary tweeted. There were tweets across the globe about us here in Guyana and about this crisis situation where one political party that happens to be in government was refusing to give up office and or to give effect to the will of the people of Guyana. And that for me was very telling about the times we're in. And it's been over this period. And that's why I'm saying if you watch over this period, it's the reactions of people. Mr. Granger, you asked a question much earlier that I wanted to answer quickly. When is Mr. Granger going to be told to stop this, or when he's going to tell his supporters and his leaders to stop this?
Enough is enough.
When he's good and ready. When he's good and ready. Mr. Granger is the person, I believe this with all my heart, that he's the mastermind behind all of this. I do not hold the view that some other people, including colleagues, have held, that he's being held hostage and this is some plan of some internal PNC person. This is a Granger plan. And tomorrow he could end this today by saying, withdraw that Court of Appeal decision. I just called their finale and I congratulated him and told him that we are prepared to work with him from the opposition and that we will always hold and stay true to Guyana and Guyana's cause. He could end this in a moment. Nobody's holding him hostage. He could go live on Facebook and say that immediately. This is David Granger. I believe this is the Grangers because I see Mrs. Granger also posting very supportive statements on her page, and I don't believe she is the kind of person who doesn't know and doesn't approve of what goes on to her Facebook page. So this is all David Granger. This is his doing, and he must be. I don't think people are unsure anymore about whether he's being held hostage and whether he is being led here. He is the leader. They are following his instructions. They are following his plan, and his plan is to stay in office regardless. Joseph Hamilton gives an example of Granger speaking, a very telling example of Granger speaking in Atlanta sometime after the 2015 election. And I believe also after the no confidence motion. And the people there asked him, how were they going to stay in office? You know, like, how are you going to do this? What are you going to do? What are the plans? And I think people expected to hear about reduced electricity cost and grants for single parents and an easier business environment. They wanted to hear policies like that. And what did he respond to say? He said, we have to study our history and make sure we do what we did. We were in office for 28 years and that didn't happen by accident. And he went on to tell them about GCOM and how important GCOM is in keeping the PNC in office. And we have seen that play out not only in the last 4 months, but even when he appointed James Patterson, unilaterally dumping 25 years of democratic practice where it's a joint nomination from the opposition leader that would cause the person to be appointed. So we see how way back when it was GCOM that, and not necessarily the chairperson and the commissioners, but the secretariat, how it was they intended to use the Guyana Elections Commission and corrupt officers therein to win the elections, not through the people's will, but by skewing votes, by thieving votes, by deleting votes, by causing all kinds of confusion, such as, you know, they raised this thing about how 49 boxes don't have documents. you know what the 49 polling presiding officers are saying. And the deputy returning officers, they're saying they were told by Mr. Mingo not to put the documents in the ballot box. They were told to put it in a bag that Mr. Mingo provided. And they put it in the bag and they gave it to Mingo. And Mingo gave it to Lowenfield. Now, Mingo and Lowenfield have turned out to be two of the biggest crooks this country has ever seen publicly. Do you believe the presiding officers who are ordinary teachers and head teachers and so on? Or do you believe these two thieves? Do you believe the returning officers who were willing to put in writing through a letter saying, we were told to do this and we did it? Or do you believe Mingo and Lowenfield? Do you understand? So he knows the question about who can end all of this is David Granger. David Granger could decide that he's going to concede the elections that he lost and that he's going to go lead his party back to a victory in 2025. Or he could attempt for a very short period more to continue the shenanigans, because it is going to be a short period more. There is very little left that can be done. And like I said, at every turn, whatever was done was responded to very quickly and very aggressively, not only by the PPP, but by all of Guyana, or the majority of Guyana, and definitely by our allies and friends across the world. So we expect to see an end to this process very soon, and Irfan Ali being sworn into office. Now, why do we want to get sworn into office? We have a pandemic we have to deal with. We have people going hungry who cannot make their bills. The GPL bill still comes. The GWI bill still comes, but we can't work because we can't go out on the road, because we could possibly catch COVID and die, because our hospital system is not prepared for the kind of numbers that could happen if we all turn out to work. We have people who have been laid off and fired in the sugar industry, in the forestry industry, in the mining industry. We have people, taxi drivers and bus drivers, who have mortgages to pay not only on their homes, but on their vehicles. They can't make those payments. We want to get into office so that we can provide service to the people of this country like we promised. Service from the manifesto, but also serve in the areas that have popped up in the last 4 months that we could not have anticipated would pop up.
Attorney Priya Manickchand, Bishop Juan Edghill, former finance minister, both national candidates for the People's Progressive Party Civic. We've dealt with these issues quite extensively and still not sufficiently. There are so many. I hope we can do this again. Thank you both for being on this program.
Michael, if I could ask just before you go off, to allow me to tell your audience and listeners, yesterday we heard from the OAS, but I'm reading right now, the spokesperson for the high-level representative on foreign affairs and security policy for the European Union. That's a bloc of more than 20 countries. They're now saying to David Granger, time up, concede, views the recount for a declaration, and go. He's standing alone. So we heard from the OAS yesterday. We're hearing from the highest level spokesperson on foreign relations from the European Union today, speaking to Granger. He's got to go. So I hope somebody shared this with him and he decides to go today.
I have no doubt that he will see it. Again, I thank you both for being a part of the program. I'm Micheal Gordon. This has been Government in Transition, brought to you by the People's Progressive Party. Thanks to the viewers and listeners, especially those in the diaspora and those listening on Freedom Radio on 91.1 FM. Thanks for watching and listening.